Hello, welcome to Free Your Children. I am your host, Tiffany Boyd, and we have a fantastic show planned for you today. It's been a little while. We had some home improvements going on. And as many of you know, since we left the radio station and transitioned to podcast platform, we are now recording in our in-home studio. And so we had to pause our Free Your Children podcast to make sure that we finished up with that particular project. So now we're back in the saddle again today. And of course, in the world and realm of education, it never seems to leave us without content. And so today's show is going to be focusing on basically what's happening in Lawrence County, Tennessee. I've written an article about this particular issue. It is focused around their new attendance policy that they have adopted in Lawrence County Public Schools, Lawrence County, Tennessee Public Schools. And the article that I have written for the Pulse should be releasing any day now. By the time this podcast airs, I will make sure that I link that article down in the comment section of this particular video so that you can go and read more about that. I would like to pull up an article that was written by, I'm going to screen share it so that you can see it here on your screen. It is going to be the WSMV article. Here it comes right here. The policy states that after 3 absences, schools will start intervention. If the student keeps missing school 8 or more days, there will be a juvenile court referral. You can fail the grade, Director of Schools Michael Adkins said during the district's June school board meeting. You can fail the course. You're going to be petitioned to court. You are not going to participate in graduation, get your driver's license or permit. Adkins also said during the meeting, we're going to take control of the attendance of our students. You can bring all the doctor's notes you want, but it is still unexcused. So I have been in a group that was started by Lawrence County residents that were extremely concerned about the adoption of this new attendance policy. And so parents have been sounding out about this. I was alerted to this by a resident of Lawrence County Schools who reached out to me. I've shared all of this over on the Free Your Children Facebook page and also over on X. It was a copy of a letter that the director of schools had sent out to local medical professionals in the area, basically accusing parents of doctor hopping. And of course, those posts are still up, so you can go over to Free Your Children and take a look at those. But it really launched an outcry from the community, and this is still going on. And so parents are trying to weigh in on their options and decide what they're going to do. So as I've been watching this unfold, I've been hearing a lot of parents making statements about homeschooling, concerned about if this is an option that they're going to be able to utilize. And so I brought my friend Kelly on. Let me pull her on so she can join us really quickly. Good morning, Kelly. How are you?
Good morning, Tiffany. I'm glad to be here.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Kelly. And I know that you are a local homeschool mom here in Tennessee. And you've joined us at the Capitol as we have fought against government-funded homeschooling in the past with the Governor's Education Freedom Scholarship Act. And you stand with us in opposition to the government funding of private education. And thank you for being willing to stand up for freedom and true private education and helping us to continue to preserve those rights here in the state of Tennessee. And I know that you and I have been discussing what is happening in Lawrence County. I believe I actually tagged you in some posts where parents were considering their options. And of course, we hear, lots of the same comments and concerns that parents always have when they're trying to make the decision if they want to homeschool their children or not. And some of those concerns are, I can't do this because I work. I'm a single mom. I can't homeschool my kids. It's too expensive to homeschool. And so what I want to do today is really talk about, because I'm seeing a lot of misinformation circulating in a lot of these spaces on social media, and it is, I am certain, coming from people who are very well intentioned, but they clearly are new to the homeschooling journey, and they have been given misinformation and not really good advice from someone, and they have passed it along in social media world. And so what we hope to do is to clarify some of that misinformation, because one of our many goals here at For Your Children is to encourage and equip parents to better protect their families and to help them be able to take up the mantle of discipling their own children. So let's start, Kelly. You're a homeschooling veteran. How long have you been homeschooling?
I have been homeschooling 16 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, 16 years. So this is our family's 22nd year of homeschooling. We're aging ourselves here, Kelly.
Yes.
We're sharing all of our secrets here. So you are a veteran, a homeschool veteran. And so I know that you have much to share about what you're seeing in terms of homeschooling and again, the legalities of that. Let's talk about what homeschooling looks like in Tennessee. So, a lot of people may not know that in the state of Tennessee, the majority of homeschool families choose the Category 4 option, also known as the umbrella option. You may hear it referred to as an umbrella school, a church-related school. That is the category that most homeschoolers in the state of Tennessee choose. And the reason why is because it is the least regulated. We actually have videos of Tennessee Department of Education officials making that statement that is the category that's least that is least monitored. I guess is that's probably not the best way to describe that, but it has the least restrictions on that particular category of homeschooling. And you can hear that. We have that video up over on our YouTube and our Rumble channels if you have questions about that, because these discussions were happening as we were in committee meetings at the Capitol. So that is the most utilized area or category of homeschooling. It is the only one that I recommend. That is the category. If you are a homeschool parent that wants the government to have the least amount of intrusion in your family, that would be the category that would be the best option for you to select. Now, you have options. So if you feel like there's another option that is best suited for your family, that's fine. But if my personal opinion is that I want the government as far removed from my family's homeschooling as possible, and that is the category that provides that. Would you care to weigh in on that, Kelly?
No, I agree. I have always used that category 4 option. Category 4, right? Yeah, I always get the 3 and 4 mixed up. I have always used an umbrella school, and it does, even among umbrella schools now, even some require, because they have a lot of autonomy to choose what they're going to ask you to turn in. And there are different umbrella schools that have ask more from you than others. So you can really do some research to find out, okay, how much. Some people like to have that. Especially when they're first homeschooling, they like to have an umbrella school that's asking for a lot because they want to have that hand holding, right? But some of us that have been homeschooling for 16 years, we just want to file our paperwork and not think about it, right?
We just want a legal option to homeschool our children, and we want everyone to leave us alone.
Yes,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because umbrella schools vary widely. They vary widely, and there are hundreds of umbrella schools. So you really need to do your research as a family and decide which umbrella school you feel like would best serve your family. We've had the same umbrella school for the entire 22 years that we have homeschooled. Of course, last legislative session, we drafted a bill, the For Your Children team drafted a bill that would have provided us an additional option that would not have required us to have to register with an umbrella school. And I still firmly believe that option, we still need to be allowed to have that option here in Tennessee. Our constitutional rights need to be recognized as they are in now 12 other states that do not require them to do that. So I am still very adamant that I do not feel like families that choose not to register under an umbrella shouldn't have to. We should not be legally required to do that.
That's right. I mean, I know we've talked before. I've had friends with a lot of people moving into
Mhm.
Tennessee from other states. I've had friends move from states that are considered less conservative, and they're so surprised when they get to Tennessee
Yes.
and they realize that they have more hoops to jump through
Yeah.
than they did in their own state.
Yeah.
It truly is harder here than in states that are considered maybe even blue states.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I know that the umbrella schools may not be that on board with the Free Act because it would open up a category where parents would have the freedom not to utilize those services. But I have said this in the past, and I will say this from now until eternity, is that if you are an umbrella school that is offering services other than just a legal covering for homeschooling, there will still be families that desire to utilize your services. So if you are offering things like, co-ops or tutorials or graduation ceremonies or dances or field trips, all the things that make a community, make a homeschooling community what it is. And there are wonderful umbrella schools that offer those resources, and I would encourage, if you are involved in an umbrella school, and I would encourage you to reach out to them and share that with them, that this isn't an attack on umbrella schools. This is an ability to give parents true educational autonomy in the state of Tennessee, and that if you are providing something other than a legal covering, then it shouldn't be a concern for you. This bill should be something that you should be on board with as well, in my opinion. But that is the category where most people land when they decide to homeschool in the state of Tennessee, because most homeschooling parents are leaving the system for a reason. And so they want to make sure they have as much autonomy as possible. Now, there's also an independent homeschooling option where you register through the Board of Education. And they have mandated testing. They have a whole list of requirements. Now, you will hear some independent homeschool families say, well, they've never enforced any of that. That doesn't matter. They still have those rules and regulations in place. And it's not a question of if they're going to enforce those, it's when are they going to enforce those.
Right.
Now, if you are a homeschooling parent that is okay with having the state directly involved in your homeschooling, you do not mind having your children tested by the state. And then if you read what it says, you can be forced to re-enroll your children into the public school system if they do not score what they consider to be on target. Again, this is all there in the public domain for you to read. But when you register through the Board of Education, directly through our state's Board of Education or your local school district, you are giving them authority into your homeschool life, into your family.
Right.
So most homeschoolers do not want that. That's the reason why they're leaving the system. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of families, I think it's just maybe a knee-jerk reaction. They don't know what else to do. They make the mistake of going to their school system and saying, how do I homeschool my kids? Whenever you go into a school district and ask them, what do I need to do to homeschool my children? More times than not, they are going to tell you to register with an online homeschooling program that they have that isn't even homeschooling. It's virtual public school at home. So you will hear those, though. We have Connection, I believe one's called Connections Academy in Tennessee. There are other accredited online schools that they are using, that they are pitching as homeschooling options. They are not homeschooling options. They are just virtual public school at home. What do you have to say about that, Kelly?
Yeah, I have. I've seen that confusion for years. And I had that confusion when I started. I know I had shared, but I'll kind of share quickly again. I thought when I started, because I worked, that I needed to use a virtual school with accredited teachers. And I actually had some homeschooling former teachers kind of set me straight and show me what to do and how to homeschool traditionally. But what I tell people is that homeschooling is not about like the location of the child and location of the books. That's not what makes it homeschooling, that you've just kind of moved them from their seat in the desk in the classroom to their seat at the kitchen table. Homeschooling is about who's in charge, who's making the decisions, right? Who's deciding what we're going to study. who's directing all of this, right? It doesn't mean that you're teaching everything. It means that you are in charge of directing, choosing
Right.
what is going to happen. And when you enroll in one of these online schools, whether it's an online public school or an online private school, you lose all of that. You're
Absolutely.
still kind of giving all of that to another teacher or administrator who's in charge.
Absolutely. And some of these programs are, if you're co-opting them out, some of them can be rather expensive. These accredited programs that, are charging the parents, they can be rather expensive. And I watch that and think, you can do this for free. There are online programs that are would be considered true homeschooling, or online resources that don't cost anything, that are parent led and parent directed. So I think that that's one thing that drives me nuts, because, like you, I've been seeing this for decades. And from personal experience, when we first removed our very first child out of the public school system, I went to the school to get her belongings, that were there in her locker, and I had a conversation. The principal very quickly wanted to have a conversation with me at the time, and he brought me into his office, and there was another teacher in there. And he very quickly told me, well, if you decide to homeschool your daughter, just know that you're going to have to bring her back for state mandated testing. And, he went through this whole, and I looked at him and I said, everything that you told me is false. I do not have to do any of those things. And so, don't think for a moment that you are going to get accurate information if you go to the local school board and ask them what you need to do to homeschool your children. That's probably the worst thing that you could possibly do, because you're going to get information that's going to benefit them and not information that's going to benefit you as a parent, most often than not. So you touched on some things, Kelly, and we're going to get into this in a minute with what you do with a working homeschooler, but watching the conversations that have been unfolding over this attendance policy, of course, it's so much more than just an attendance policy. This is all attached to Title I funding. This is all attached to the multi-tiered systems of support that has been put into place. We have been watching this now for several years unfold. The biggest threat here that parents need to understand is it's not about being unexcused. It's about being handed over to the juvenile justice system, where once you enter that system, you are literally gambling with your child being able to remain in your home. Right. And I think that most parents in Tennessee do not understand this. That is the long-reaching goal. In the state of Tennessee, we have already passed legislation that allows for at-risk boarding charter schools to open. And make no mistake, these at-risk boarding charter schools are where children will reside. One of the qualifications to earn a bed at an at-risk boarding charter would be chronically absent. It's written into the verbiage of the bill. So what you're seeing is a way for school systems to begin to identify children as at risk. And then once you enter the juvenile justice system, you run a very big risk of serving jail time. I actually received some messages last night where parents are right now finding themselves in the juvenile justice court system from last year's attendance policy, the previous year. They're just now going to court. They have been remanded into the court system to serve 30 days in jail, a weekend in jail, whatever that may be. We sat in the Coffee County Juvenile Justice Center, and we sat there and listened. And of course, all of this was based on, we were there to hear the cases that were based off chronic absenteeism, truancy, all that. And we heard them, tell the parents, if you don't re-enroll your children, back into public school, we can send them away. So once a child is adjudicated to the state, the parents lose all control. They have no more autonomy as to where your child is going to be residing. So here in Tennessee, and I heard this when we started really expressing the need for the FREE Act and really started underlining, why we wrote the bill, why it's so important for the state of Tennessee. We had people say to us, oh, that kind of stuff isn't going on in our school system. Things like that aren't happening here. It's happening everywhere. It's happening across the nation. It's happening all across the state of Tennessee. Lawrence County is a relatively rural county with a population of like 12,200, I believe, were the statistics that I found on that particular county. That's not a lot of people. And in Lawrence County, they are implementing this. So what is your take on what's really happening with these attendance policies, Kelly?
Well, and I know that you are more well versed in this area than I am, but I am married to somebody in law enforcement, and I know that this is just anything like this, whether it's the well check policy that we had to fight against,
Yes.
or this attendance, it's just a way to get a child in the door of the system, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's not to say everybody that works in that said system is out to get your child, but those agendas do exist. And
Exactly.
when you have a way of just opening the door, just like when we talk about opening the door to government funded education, it's just getting that crack in the door open. That's all that this does. And this is over attendance. I mean, like, you're putting it's just over whether that child's seat is in a chair. It's not even over whether they're learning anything or not, right?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And so it's very obviously just tied to that money and the that crack in the door. I think it's two things. I think it's the money that you lose when the child's not in the seat, and that just cracking open the door so that there's a way to access getting your child into that system.
Absolutely. It's definitely about control and money. And that's the agenda that's marching forward. And you're right. I think a lot of individuals who are involved in the government school system may not really even have a clue about what they're involved in and the roots behind it and the agendas behind it. That's why we have been so focused on doing everything we could and can to educate communities on this is what the agenda is. This is where it came from. This is where we are today, and this is where we're headed, into the future. And the problem is, there's a lot of censorship that goes along with sharing truth about something that could potentially destroy an agenda. And so we consistently come up against those that don't necessarily want an educated populace.
That's correct.
And so when you're being censored, it typically means that you are hovering over a target, and there's a reason why they do not want that information out there. So it's important to have these conversations. I feel for the families that are in Lawrence County, Tennessee, that think that they don't have any options, because you do have options. And so one of the things that we wish to do here at For Your Children is to provide you with resources that can help you navigate into homeschooling, especially if you think that it's not an option for you. And that's one of the reasons, other than the fact that I think Kelly's a wonderful person, and she and I believe a lot of the same things when it comes to our educational system. She does have her own business called The Working Homeschooler. And so I wanted to bring her on because one of the things that I've seen over and over, even on the Free Your Children page, when we share a meme or we share a graphic about how wonderful homeschooling is, immediately people come on. And, the trolls have found us, which someone sent me a private message the other day and said, well, you definitely made it. The trolls are out. But I don't think the trolls understand that the more that they comment, the more they help us beat the algorithm.
Right.
So,
I was going to tell you, just send a couple of them over my way. I'll take them,
absolutely. So, actually, unless they get like really vulgar or violent, we allow them to remain on, as a presence on our social media pages, because what they do is the more comments, however asinine they may be, help us bump up, in the algorithm, and then more people see our posts, and then people who truly want to learn, and have a desire to link themselves into a homeschooling community, find what we're doing. And we have experienced phenomenal growth. I think the last time I looked at our social media algorithm, we had reached 1.7 million views.
I know I'm personally I'm seeing your posts on my feed more often now. So it's yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so, as annoying as it may be, some of it, I just have to say, some of it's hilarious. I'm just like, what? They have a lot of free time on their hands to come up with some of the things that they comment. But
But you know,
one thing that we see,
and a lot of those, one thing to point out with how this relates to what we're talking about here is that some of those are coming from the education field, right?
absolutely,
And
yes.
you know, when you're talking about things like attendance laws, right? And there are so many people looking at homeschooling, right? There is a
Yes.
fear out
Yes.
there. There is a fear, and I
Yes.
remember us all saying this whenever homeschooling over the last few years, when it started to explode, we all seemed to have the same kind of reaction. We said, "This is great that more families are finding out they can do this, but this is
Uh-huh.
also going to start bringing the attention and the attempts at
Yes.
legislation, right? All the different ways
Yes.
that we can legislate, and when
Yes.
you do things like these attendance laws, and also the things that you
Mhm.
said, when people come to you and ask about homeschooling, you give them all kinds of
Mhm.
wrong information, which sometimes isn't intentional. Most of the time, they don't know the homeschool laws, right? And they're
Right.
just telling you
Mhm.
what they think, but they get all of these options confused, right?
Yeah.
Between these, public school online and actual homeschooling. And so you get really bad
Right.
information, but you get directed into those
Mhm.
online schools that are still public schools. This is
Yes.
all connected, right? This is all connected because there's this panic that there are so many people leaving the school system.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think it's
Yeah.
backfiring, you know?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's backfiring as well. I think that they banked on the fact that they thought that parents would go along with it because they were so desperate to have a place to drop their kids off. But I think by and large, parents are just getting really sick of what they see happening, and they are deciding anything has to be better than what we're doing now,
Yes.
right? And they're making it clear they are also very bold in their disdain and disregard for parents and children in general. They are making it very clear that this is clearly not about the kids. This is about something else. And so thankfully, more and more parents are waking up. Yes, you're right. When that happens, then those of us who've been out here homeschooling for all these years, when we were pretty much left alone, because even though we weren't growing at breakneck speed like homeschooling has experienced since
Right.
COVID. COVID was really the catalyst to an explosion of the homeschooling movement, in my opinion, because when I ran a homeschool support group for Middle Tennessee during COVID, our group grew 286% during COVID. And so, some of those went back to the public school system when schools opened up, but a lot did not. A lot remained, in the homeschooling network. And now it's almost become trendy, to homeschool. So I think that is another reason why we see the explosion, in the numbers of homeschooling. But by and large, I think that thankfully parents are starting to wake up. But that also means the government knows that they're losing their grip. So they're going to do whatever they can tier of freedom, which is true private. And that's the reason why they are trying to implement and advance charter schools and the fake government school choice narrative that they have started, because that is their way to encroach and destroy true private education. So those of us like you and I who know and understand the agenda because we've done our research and we have looked at what has happened in other states, become the voice of speaking out, against these programs. And we're just trying to encourage and equip and educate other families so that we can grow a stronger collective community that knows and understands why protecting true private education is so important. And I know that you are very passionate about helping working parents homeschool. And I pulled up the group that I mentioned. And again, and I've had these comments on my own personal page. People talk a lot about the privilege of being able to homeschool. You're privileged. And that is the reason why you can homeschool your children. I want you to give your perspective of privilege. And do you believe that homeschooling is only for the privileged? And do you believe that those of us who homeschool are privileged?
Yeah. So, it's funny, and I think, and I was just kind of flipping because I think that statement is in like the first paragraph of my little workbook, because that's the first thing that you hear. But the thing is, it's not about privilege, because let's not even talk about the working parents. Let's talking about the parents who make the sacrifice to stay home.
Mhm.
Most homeschoolers who are have a one income are living off of great sacrifice. They are not, you have homeschooling kind of, it happens across all demographics now, right? So you do have the wealthy families where they can afford to do, a lot of creative things, but by and large, the homeschool community with one income is, they are not in some type of privileged class of wealth. They are making lots of sacrifices. They are, scrimping everywhere they can. One car is what I hear a lot, so they're not like getting in the car and driving all over to these great, field trips all the time, because they're sharing one vehicle.
Right.
But these are people who make it work. Now, when it comes to sometimes it's a matter of getting rid of all of those extras, right? We're not going to take the fancy vacations. We're not going to be going out to eat. We're going to be, cutting back on our expenses. Sometimes you are already in the situation where you have cut back on all the vacations and cut back on all of the fancy things, and you are still needing a double income. That's unfortunately what results from there being mostly two, and the economy always adjusts, right, to what is the norm in society. And so especially in the last couple years, that has been harder. I will tell you that I am still all for doing everything you can to make, if you can do it on the one income. But if you can't, you are not powerless to homeschool.
Right.
And that is where I was, 15, 16 years ago, whenever I decided to homeschool. I started to realize that, working moms, they say that you can do all of these things while you work. Why not also direct the education of your children, right? Because we were spending so much time on helping with homework, and we had absolutely no control over the curriculum. It was just, leaving work and going to your second job, but you have no idea what's going to be on that school agenda, right? And I know that is where this powerlessness comes from, because I experienced it, right? I know that these families, especially, let's say these Lawrence County families that are considering this, I know you feel powerless because you feel like maybe you don't have the time, right? The truth is that time gets reduced. That time gets reduced when you have control over everything. You don't have to be powerless. You can homeschool on off days. You can homeschool in the evenings. There are lots of different things that working, and I know I'm covering a lot of things here, but the basic point I'm trying to get across right now is that you are not powerless. And the school makes you feel like you are powerless, that you need to have all of this knowledge, that you need to know all of these things. There's so much support. You are not powerless. It is possible to homeschool in any situation.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up, because now, when I started homeschooling, there was no internet system like we have today. We and where we lived where we lived at the time, we didn't even have service. So we were lucky, to be able to communicate with people via email, finding other homeschool. There certainly weren't online communities where you just sat down and clicked to find out if there was a field trip or a get together or a meetup. You had to pick up the phone and call. If you were lucky, you had availability to email, where you could send emails and try to, connect with people. But now, with social media and all the different social media platforms, there's a way to connect yourself to so many different resources that you can't say that you're not qualified or that you don't have the support services available, because they're all there. You may not know that they exist or where to go and get them, but the support services are there. And so, again, one of the things that I hear all the time is working parents cannot homeschool. That sounds all great and wonderful, but we're a working family. We can't homeschool. What do you say to that, Kelly?
I say there are hundreds of thousands of working parents who are working in homeschooling. Even in my own homeschooling community, say in my own tutorial, it's rare for me to not, most moms, there are some that are working full time, some are working part time. Most are bringing in some type of income at this point.
Right.
And it's just a matter of just taking apart that idea of that school is childcare, right? And
Yes.
yeah, that's
Mhm.
important because we become dependent. That's a
Yeah, that's the bottom line. I think for most people, when they say we can't work, we can't homeschool because we work, what they're saying is, what are we going to do with our children while we're at work all day? That's really the how the conversation needs to be steered. What do you say? What do you say
Okay,
to
well,
that?
I always have a little grace here, but then I also have a little tough love because I've been in that situation, right? I was that
Mhm,
person trying, that
mhm,
was dependent on that for a while. But we also have to
uh-huh,
realize that when we're in that situation, we're dependent on a government resource. We're dependent on a
yeah,
government program, and I think a
mhm,
lot of especially conservative parents who would
mhm,
otherwise say that it's not good to be dependent on a government
yeah,
program, just kind of
mhm,
don't even see that connection when it comes to public school and childcare. And you are right.
exactly.
There was a time, say many years back, where parents were saying, they're not sure that they would want to homeschool. Now I hear more and
Mhm,
more that parents want to homeschool, but they don't know how to do that disconnection, right? And
yes. Mhm,
um, it's not as easy as, say, the stay-at-home parent that just goes to school and so unenrolls them and brings them home. You do have to do a little bit of figuring out and planning, but there are lots of different ways that people are making this work. Some are working opposite shifts from each other. Some are working with
mhm,
homeschool families. You can trade out things that you can do for homeschool families, and they can do childcare for you during the day. There are older students who are staying at home.
mhm,
There are a lot of situations where kids are coming to work with their parents. Some are able to work at home some of those days.
mhm.
I always say the answers to how this works are as varied as working homeschoolers, right? And
Absolutely. And I can give you two different examples of how personally we navigated this. So our children never went, we have five, and our children never went to daycare. Even when I worked full time, when I was a full time teacher that taught in the public school system before our kids were old enough to go to that school system with me, my husband and I worked opposite shifts.
we did the same.
So he was at home. Yeah, he was at home during the day with them, and then I came in from my job as a teacher, and then he left to go to his job. So, and we did that on purpose. We purposely arranged our schedule so that we could make sure that we were the ones providing the care for our children because we did not have family who could serve in a capacity to watch our kids. So that was what we did when we were working. And then when I was a classroom teacher, when I was a public school teacher, and at the time I was teaching kindergarten, I would have parents call the school and ask the school secretary or tell the school secretary that they were shopping in a larger city, probably about an hour away from where the school was, and that they would not be able to get to school at the designated pickup time to pick up their child because they wanted to continue with their shopping spree, and that it was my responsibility as their classroom teacher to babysit them while they shop. So, and that didn't just happen once; it happened more than one time. One was a parent had gone to sell their blood plasma in Nashville, and they were not going up their child on time. And I was expected to stay there and babysit their child until they could find it convenient for them to get to the school and pick up their child that was enrolled in my class. So, you
That's
know,
old.
yeah, very bold, very bold. It was an expectation. It was a regular expectation that the teacher from parents, and I'm not saying all parents, I'm saying it was a regular expectation from certain parents that were utilizing the public school system where I worked, that the teachers were there specifically to provide daycare, free daycare for their children.
And that's a good point because not only is this not a healthy thing, it's also
Mhm.
insulting to the teacher, right?
Yes.
If for you to be in that place of dependence and saying, I need that teacher for childcare, that's insulting to the teacher in that classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
And
so
that was one of the many reasons why why I decided to resign from my teaching profession and come home and direct and lead and disciple my own children. And I think, there's a mass exodus from the public school system anyway of teachers. Teachers are leaving the classroom because it kind of, once you have done your research for a lot of teachers, once you start doing your research on the roots of the education system that we have in place in the United States today, it's almost like once you see these things, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And as a Christian, then you start, because for your children is a Christian ministry, then you start asking yourself, how can I continue to participate in a system that is propagating all the things that are the antithesis of what my Christian faith is supposed to be? So I think for a lot of teachers that leave the system, that's why, as they get in there and they start learning, how things really work and what it's all about, a large number are leaving because they realize that they are not there to serve in the capacity that they thought that they were going to be serving in. They don't tell you these things when you're going to college to be a teacher.
Right. You know that you want to, you have this idea that you want to help children,
Right.
that you,
Exactly.
this noble, noble reason for wanting to, and you just kind of get pulled into it, and then you realize what you're in the middle of.
Absolutely. And so I think that you're right. I think that the solutions for families in terms of what am I going to do with my children while I work all day are as varied as the family, but there are options. But I think the question comes down to how much of a sacrifice are you willing to make as a family? What's your opinion on that?
That's actually is what it comes down to. And I think it's, we learned during the last several years that when there was something that was what we thought was dangerous enough for our children at school, then parents were willing to bring them home.
Right.
You know what I mean? And figure it out. And I think
the way during COVID when the school shut down.
Yeah. I think that we talk about the one income families and how, it's a matter of sacrifice financially.
Mm-hmm.
I think when it comes to the working parents, I think it's just a matter of understanding how important it is. Like, how important is this to you? All of these reasons, right? It's hard for me to find a parent that doesn't have a reason they would like to homeschool, right? It's, do you realize how important these reasons are? And is it important enough to you to rearrange your schedule, to maybe it's not as good for your career for you to change to a day or a shift that would, work better for homeschooling, maybe you don't need to make any changes that way, but you just need to make the uncomfortable reach out to ask a couple families like, hey, I know your high schooler homeschools. Do you think they would be able to cover childcare for me 2 days a week? And then I'm looking for another one to cover the other 2 days. Sometimes it's just that discomfort of reaching out.
Right.
And if you really consider how important these things are to you, the things that you want to get your child away from, those things are worth it. That discomfort is worth it to figure it out. And I honestly think that is one of the biggest hurdles. I know we're going to talk about a workshop coming up, but that's one of the biggest things we're going to focus on is just the logistics of how do we do this? What are our options? How do we reach out to people, right? Because that's the hurdle. That's the thing that people have trouble with, is that discomfort.
Right. One of the things I was talking to someone this morning, and I get a lot of private messages, emails, phone calls from people, all about education, what's going on in education in their state, in their county, in their district. One thing, and I've written about this several years ago, I penned an article about this. One of the things that I hear most often from moms that reach out to me is that they want to homeschool, but their husband won't allow them to homeschool because he wants them to be in a position where they are contributing to the family by means of working a job and bringing money in. And so the husbands are not on board with homeschooling for that very reason. So what do you say to families who have, if they're a husband and a wife, and the husband is resistant to homeschooling because he wants the wife to continue being a breadwinner in the home. Do you address that at all, Kelly?
Well, that's a little bit tougher. It's funny. We have a whole. I actually have a blog where I interviewed my husband on his. This wasn't the reason. It wasn't so much for income, right? And I didn't see that curve coming. But where he talks about his transition from when I first started homeschooling, he wasn't really sure it was a good idea. To by the time we got to that end at the end of that year, he said, "Oh well, they don't have a choice. They're homeschooling next year." It was that much of a transition. And
Right.
we didn't actually cover the, like that aspect of it. I will say this though. I will say that it's important to be on the same page. It's important that your homeschool isn't a source of like contention between you and your husband, because that is important for the two of you be on the same page. But if he is not on board with you, if you can stay home and he's not on board with you staying home, I think that's something got to work through and try to do eventually. But if he's okay with homeschooling, if we can work it out while you're working, then there are things you can do. Just like we've talked about, there are ways to make that work. And I would maybe ask for him for a compromise. Hey, can you look at what ways we can work together to make this work and I still bring in my income?
Yeah, and I have interviewed some fathers, some homeschool dads in the past. I did a great series on encouragement for men, and I would highly encourage you to give those radio shows, because that segment was done when we still had the radio program, and allow your husbands to listen to what those men have to say about a biblical education and what the father's role is in the home and in terms of education, and why discipling your children is so important. And I think coming from a man, may be able to make more of a connection, with them. But I think it's so important. It is an issue that is not often, if at all, discussed in the churches. And I think that, again, if you're a Christian, it is a very important discussion that is not being had, that needs to be had, because I feel like, and I get, inflation and the economy and what's happening and how expensive things are. I understand all of that completely. But I think that we have gotten so far away from biblically what our roles are supposed to be. And we have abdicated the responsibility of raising and discipling our children to other people, whether it be the church, because it's not the church's responsibility to disciple your children. It's the parents' responsibility to disciple their children.
And even primarily directed at fathers. It's not their. Another great resource for this is Israel Wayne with Family Renewal, and he will point out to husbands that no, you are not helping your wife with her homeschooling. The homeschooling is actually your responsibility. She's helping you. Even if she's the one doing most of the work, it's really the father's responsibility, just like you said. So
absolutely, and we have gotten so far away as a Christian community from the model and what those responsibilities are, that is one of the reasons why we see what we see today. And of course, this was all done on purpose. The whole point of getting the mothers out of the home was to replace the position of the family with the state, which they have done. It was also to create consumers so that parents would feel like they had to go to work because we consume and we consume and we consume.
Right,
so
exactly.
This is decades of indoctrination that now we are coming up against, because parents know, I think a large amount of Christian parents know there is something wrong. They know that the school system, the agenda that is being implemented in the school system, is counter to discipling children in a Christian nature. And it's also designed to assert parental authority. It just is by nature, in loco parentis. I mean, it is. And you can argue that point with me all day long, but that is the bottom line.
It's you can't really argue with that. And to that point, I think we make a mistake all the time that we say that we say everything went downhill when we took prayer out of schools or we took the Bible out of schools, and no. Everything went downhill when we took the education out of the family.
Absolutely.
That's where things started to deteriorate.
Yeah,
When we
I
took the
see.
responsibility out.
Yes, I see all of this all the time. We go, got to get the Bible back in school, the 10 Commandments back in school. We have to get. You're fighting the wrong battles.
We were already on that path whenever we started sending all the kids to school. Yeah,
Exactly.
we were already on that path. Yeah,
exactly. So trying to reel in the narrative here that somehow the public school systems can be fixed, so that then all of these parents can send their kids back to school. We had a legislator make that statement. One of our representatives, Scott Sapicki, made the statement that he was going to fix public schools to the point where no parent would have to homeschool.
my goodness,
And
that is so backwards.
and it's such a comical statement because that's not why we're homeschooling. It wouldn't matter if the school system was what most people would consider perfect. I would still never send my children away to be discipled by complete strangers ever.
Absolutely the same. You can, you can tell me that I have free tuition to a private Christian school that's even run by, people that I would consider trying to do the right thing. But I would not want you to take my child, but I want to have that responsibility.
Right.
I want to have the responsibility of directing their education. So it's not, that is a very good point. Homeschooling is not, we're homeschooling because the schools are so bad. We're homeschooling because this is what we feel we're supposed to do.
Exactly. We feel it. This is what we're called to do. And we feel like it's our responsibility. And we take those Christian commandments very seriously. And, that is the fact, that is the leading factor behind, why we do what we do. And so, Kelly, I want to talk about what you're doing with the Working Homeschooler to provide families with resources, working families with resources, real tangible things that they can do to help them navigate the homeschooling world while working. So talk to our listeners about that.
Okay, sure. Well, I'm actually excited about some new things I'm going to be offering. I have done over the last, I think it was 2019 when I first had started at this, and I had always offered some self-study courses, some resources that people could go through on their own, right? Because remember, I'm working full-time and homeschooling, and so I can't really commit to a lot of, things that aren't self-study. Well, that has shifted for me, and I have reduced my work hours, and this is now becoming my focus and my work. And so now I have always felt that parents have needed to have a little bit more than that. I always wanted to be able to give a little bit more like live support.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's what I'm doing. First, I'm starting with a free workshop that has 3 live sessions so that I can answer some questions as they come in, right? That's going to start towards the end of August here. And we are going to do 3 live sessions. I realize that I'm talking to working parents most of the time, so there will be recordings, right? But there will be a little more interaction. And that workshop is going to focus on some of that big hurdle, right, that we talked about, how we'll spend some time looking at how you can, look at your assets and your schedule and your spouse's assets and the gaps in your schedule and what kind of, ideas you can do to, try to cover those gaps. We'll spend some time on that. But I am also, after that point, going to be offering some monthly support through something called the Working Homeschooler Fellowship. And that will also involve some monthly resources, but it will also involve some live sessions with me each month, so that to help you kind of get over that hurdle. And when you get stuck, you have more than just a recorded class. You can ask the question, right? And so that's what I'm going to start doing is offering more of live support in my products. And so when actually this first group that comes through the free workshop, because you will be helping me start this in a new way, that will be where you guys will have the most preferential pricing to start off, right? And we'll be able to have that right through as I add to it, as things grow, you get that initial founding member price, right, of being able to being part of that initial group. So that is what I'm doing, but that's not the very beginning of it, because I also have some resources that I'm offering people while they are waiting for that to open up. The first session is going to be August 19th, and I won't open up registration for that until it gets a little bit closer.
Okay.
But what I'm doing now is I do have, I do offer, as part of my training, I offer a workbook. It's called the Working Homeschooler Success Plan. And actually the first bit of that we go into more depth of some of the things we talked about today about like the family and kind of the history of giving you kind of a foundation of, where did education begin? What happened to the family? And, where are we now? And how is homeschooling helping to repair that? And then it also goes through kind of, the path of, homeschoolers go through a little bit of a path of, this is something I'm thinking about doing, right? Something I'm dreaming about doing. This is something I'm planning to do. This is something I'm in the middle of and I'm building and I'm trying to figure out. And then it's more, I own it and I'm able to feel comfortable in it. And then I'm a host and I can help others. There's a little bit of a path there. And I kind of go through that and spend some time walking people through that so they understand it's not, I'm not going to be an expert in this tomorrow, right? And that's also the reason for the monthly program, right? To be able to help you move through each one of those stages. So right now, you can get on the list to be notified, right? To be notified when that opens up at the end of August. And when you do that, you can do that through actually through a special page for being referred by Tiffany. You would just go to workinghomeschooler.com/Tiffany. And that is how you get to the ability to sign up for those first 2 chapters of that workbook.
And I will drop that link in the show, Kelly. And I'm also going to, you're already featured on our website, but I'm also going to make sure that the link on the website is connected to that link as well, to help people navigate there. This is just it's so timely. It's such a phenomenal opportunity and resource that you're offering to the homeschool community at large. I hope everyone will sign up and take the course because, again, this is something, this is a statement that you're going to hear over and over and over again as a stumbling block to homeschooling. So even if you are not working, if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're homeschooling your kids, you're still going to hear other people say, I can't homeschool my kids because I have to work. And this is a resource that you can point them toward.
Right. Yeah. And it's the other thing is you get a couple other freebies to kind of help prepare you before this class opens. And I do that on purpose, right? I want you to now get this free workbook through Tiffany's link so that you can start preparing, start reading these things. And then you will also get a little video series on confidence in homeschooling, tackling all of those things like, I don't know if I'm qualified, right? What about this school? What about this? I have a great story on there about something I realized about a private school, and I'll save that for that. But a nice little video series for that. And then finally, after you receive that, you kind of get 3 days of freebies, right? And that third day, you actually get a workbook to start through some of those logistics we're going to go through just to start thinking about what are the assets on my schedule, what are the gaps on my schedule, because I know that takes time. So I'm doing this in a certain way on purpose, right? I'm not opening up the registration for that course yet, because I want you to get this workbook. I want you to, learn about being more confident. I want you to start thinking about some of the logistics in your schedule. So when the free workshop opens, like you've had some of that foundation and we can start working through some of those things. So that's what I'm recommending right now, is that you go to Tiffany's link and get that workbook and get signed up to be notified when it opens up.
Right. I'm so excited. I'm excited for you, Kelly, and I'm also excited for all the families that this is going to bless. And I do want to say that in our area, we live in Tennessee. We don't live in Lawrence County, but we do live in Tennessee. But in our area, school has already started back. So the kids have already shown up for their first day of school. But you as a parent need to realize it's never too late to remove your children from school. It doesn't matter that school is started back. You can remove them from public school at any point.
Do you know when I get the most traffic in my website and the most engagement? About October. About October, when that first report card comes out in our area. Anyway, well, about the time because I know what some of you parents are thinking now. You're thinking, well, this is a new year. We're going to give it a new start. I remember being in that point. There was 2 years I did that before I actually started homeschooling, right? It's going to be different this year. We're going to have a better teacher. We're going to be better prepared. And then once that first 9 weeks is done, like that's usually been shot, right?
Yeah,
And that's when people start going to my page. So going in
absolutely.
August is nothing.
It goes in cycles. Usually summer for me, I don't start getting a lot of questions about homeschooling over the summer. Now, when they do something asinine like they've done in Lawrence County and come out with a ridiculous draconian attendance policy, then yes, start getting lots of questions. But it's typically based around an event. For instance, if there's a school shooting, then there'll be an influx of parents, panicking and wanting to remove their children from public school. Like you said, if there is an issue with report cards when they first come out, there's that. If their child has been, or they want to identify their child with, some type of diagnoses or have them tested for something, and the parent doesn't want to do that, they'll reach out to me. So it's usually an incident, some type of incident that spurs the interest on. But I want to encourage parents, don't wait for something to happen, because then you're being reactive instead of proactive.
Right. Don't wait for October when you're like, oh, what do we do? Just take care of it now.
Even if you aren't sure, but you're just trying to get your feet wet and see if this will work for your family, sign up and take the class now and get some information now. Even if you haven't decided yet, talk to Kelly, ask her questions, get involved with the community that she's creating there. And that will help you be able to make better educated decisions for your family, and also provide you with a support network in real time to help you navigate that. So I'm excited for you, Kelly. I know that you've been on the show before. I'll link that show as well, so listeners can go back and hear what we talked about in that show. I am a firm believer and supporter of the work that you do. I think that resources like this are exactly what parents need. They've been conditioned to believe that they can't do it, but we're here to tell them that they can do it. It is possible for you to be able to navigate this, and we want to make sure that Free Your Children is pointing our families to resources that can help them. So, Kelly, tell our listeners again where they can find you.
Well, I am on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. Most of my engagement is on Facebook. And again, the best place to get started, to get this workbook, is workinghomeschooler.com/Tiffany. You want to go to, you won't get to that workbook page if you don't do the /Tiffany at the end. So make sure you add that on.
Fantastic. Well, Kelly, as always, it is an honor to have you join us here. Thank you for all the work that we're doing. And to the parents out there, put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. And that is exactly what we are trying to provide you here at Free Your Children with, our tools that you will need to help you do just that, so that you can fight the battle that we feel is raging against our nation's children. And we are standing for truth, and we are doing our best to educate families. We are still participating in our seminar series. So if you would like for us to come and speak to your group about all things education, we have a plethora of different topics. You can find some of those on the website. That's not a comprehensive list. We do customize our seminars for the area where we are presenting. The next event that we have on our calendar coming up, we will be in Sumner County. If you go to our website, freeyourchildren.com, and click on events, you will see where we're going to be next. So if you're in the area, I hope that you will join us there. Watch for updates about our bill, the FREE Act, which we plan on running again this legislative session. So if you're in Tennessee, I would hope that you would be supporting that particular bill. Also, stay updated on the work that we're doing by signing up for our free newsletter, where you can get updates in real time. It's completely free. You can sign up for that over on our website at freeyourchildren.com. We're on all social media platforms. If you haven't already, make sure you're following us on Facebook, X. We're on Rumble, YouTube. We have a Substack as well. Just about everywhere you can think of, we're there. We're doing our best to try to keep up with all of the social media platforms, but we are exploding and growing. We're exploding and growth. So please have some grace with us as we go through our growing pains. So if you've sent me a message and I have not gotten back to you now, just know that I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to wade through all of the messages and emails that I receive on a daily basis. And as always, thank you for reaching out to me with your tips, your topics. If you have something or someone you would like for us to interview, and the topic is based around education, parental rights, constitutional rights, just shoot me an email or reach out to me, and I would be happy to take that into consideration and hopefully get them on the show. As always, thank you so much for all of our loyal and dedicated followers to Free Your Children. We love you here at Free Your Children, but remember, Jesus loves you so much more. God bless.